Okay, good afternoon. The last one. I'm happy. I don't know if you are. The beginning of holidays. No, but you remember the last time we deal with what I thought will be a clear case of outer space and with the landscape. And even then, when we work a little bit on the concept behind this exhibition that we will have, it's called Expanding Horizon, with this idea of nature transcendent and unifying, let's say, the country. And on the other hand, this nature transcended because it's perceived as a kind of natural resources, if you want. How even in a clear case of, I would say, the outside, you have also ideological implication and even political one. So today we will deal with the public space, par excellence, the politics, how the politics get translated in a picture. And when you ask the question in those terms, the first thing that comes to mind, it is that it will be difficult because politics, by its very nature, is closer, let's say, to language, to the word, to discourse, than to visual image. And the reason for that, I think, I didn't invent these ideas. I took them in great mind and great philosophers, like I thought of Hannah Arendt. And she explained that both philosophy and theology are not very good to speak about politics because what they speak about could be applied to one person only. Right? It's true if you define man or woman or if you define salvation or that, you could be alone in the world and it will apply to you. But with politics, you need many people. You cannot make politics with a single individual. There's always interaction. There's always seeking for a kind of way to coexist or to associate yourself around a certain value. And this creates an equality between people, but also maintain their differences on many other topics. You could agree on one thing, let's say how to make the economy of this country works, but disagree on religion, disagree on many other things, and be still in a kind of political compound. The first thing, though, you need a plurality to have politics. If you have only one individual, there's no politics. The other thing, politics happens between people and not inside of each one. It is essentially a way to define relationship, a way to define how we could interact. And this, of course, the tool by excellence to achieve that is speech. It's to talk. It's to exchange opinion, try to convince the other, or try to be convinced by the other. And this importance of speech and this importance of the discourse in the politic space, if you want, is such that at first you says, what a painter will be able to do is to represent maybe just people speaking, an orator. But also maybe they could be tempted to go on the level of politics and to talk themselves and to quit painting a little bit and to write manifesto or to write or to take position in society. And you do have these two things. Or you try to represent this essential element of speech, or also eventually you says this is not enough, image will not really achieve what I want to achieve. I want to speak, I want to say what I think should be done. You see these two things. And in fact, I was thinking, when you think of the very beginning of politics, for instance, among the Greeks, in the ancient Greeks, they had a fantastic system in which you had a place in the middle of Athens, an agora. Agora means a place where you can discuss. And all the citizens of Athens could come there and make their view being understood and have each one time to speak and to convince the other. the Greek words for that was isonomia. The isonomia, you have isos, means equal, similar. And nomia means the law, nomos, the law. And so the law was that each one have equal time or equal possibility to make his opinion understood and known by the others. That was the agora. If you remove speech from the agora, what you have, it's an empty space. And if you go to Athens today, that's the agora as you see it. It's a kind of empty space where you look for Plato or Socrates or all these extraordinary men who were there and making their philosophy nearby. There was even a group who was called the Stoicians, who was called that way because they were near the Stoa. And the Stoa was a market, was a long, I will show you an example of what it is, in which on the agora, they could stay there and speak about problems and philosophy and all that with anybody who happened to be around. And Socrates himself used to like to go there. But when you see it as it is now, it is the empty space because the speech is no more there. That's why I said there's a special challenge when you think of representation of politics because of this importance of speech in politics. There was an attempt to make reconstruction of the agora at the time of the Greek, like here. It's a very fanciful one, but it's fun. It gave an idea of what people were expecting that it was, you know. So you have this huge place, sort of elevated, with stairs bringing to it, and around it you have temples, you have a lot of statues also on pedestal and all. And really, like, this is the place, this is the center place of Athens. More modern reconstruction agree basically on the idea that there is a place in the middle surrounded by a series of construction with different aim or different objectives. Say, for instance, you have this temple of Hephaestus that I showed you in a picture before. Say, if I go back, the one on the right here. If you go here, it is on the right, down there. The same temple is there. And in the south part, that means the further one, you have a series of buildings like the Mint, and like a fountain, like a Stoa, and everything, where all around this agora, you have all these places where a lot of people were involved. The Stagirion, for instance, were for the army to discuss about different strategy. And then the Tolos was a kind of restaurant where the leaders could have their meal there. And then you have all these buildings, and the Stoa are in the bottom on the left, if you want, are this big row of columns in which normally you will have market, you know, you will have people who are trying to sell stuff, but also eventually philosopher walking there in the shadow and discussing about the existence of God or not, or whatever. So that was the thing. And so the problem then is how to represent this discourse, this aspect, and also eventually how was translated the temptation of certain artists, not all of them, to go on the political arena. And I want to start with the evident case of both things in the 19th century. It's a painter who's called Joseph Légaré. You see a self-portrait of him here on the left and a portrait of his wife on the right, in which at first sight, it seems like a nice couple and all that. You cannot suspect much of what Monsieur Légaré was able to do. He will be interested in, as a painter, to paint certain political event, let's say. For instance, orator giving a speech. That would be a subject that could attract him. But also circumstances where people try to stop you to speak. Where violence is applied against an orator, for instance, that to stop him and he, during the period where he is of the 19th century, and think of the rebellion of 1837, it was a period where opinion could be quite intense. On the other hand, Légaré was also tempted to go on the political scene himself, to get involved, to be elected as a representative of the city of Quebec and things like that. And so it's a good case of this mixture of interest as a painter and also as, eventually, somebody who wants to be involved in politics. His involvement in politics begin to take a certain intensity when this gentleman here, Louis-Joseph Papineau, was presented as a possible orator to the Assembly. You had at the time, of course, Canada was divided in two parts, let's say the Upper Canada and Lower Canada. Each one have his parliament, in a way, with a legislative assembly and an executive council. The council was responsible to the Governor General at the time, and the law were created in the assembly, but they have to be approved, of course, in higher court. And when they tried to make this union of the two Canada, and Louis-Joseph Papineau was presented as a possible orator at the level of the assembly, of the Legislative Assembly. Of course, there was a tully from the Anglophone part of the province at the time against him. Why? Because he was known as very, very radical, very loved by French Canadians, and they thought, okay, maybe it will create an unbalance and all that. We should not have a guy like this. We should have a guy more moderate, more gentle, you know, and not an excité, like Papineau. Légaré very typically get much involved with Papineau. This is his man. He will follow him in everything. And right away, when he's dismissed from this post, Légaré created a petition that was deposited, of course, to the Governor General to try to get Papineau back in politics. It didn't work, but Légaré, this is the type of things he will do all the time. To get involved like this, or to attack also the moderate people who try to say, well, we could have something, and say we don't need to have everything right away. We could have a compromise and all that. He will be always on the side for the more radical one. For instance, this nice man here, René-Édouard Caron, finally lost a battle with Légaré. They fight together about this type of issue. For instance, at a certain point, Papineau created what they call the 92 proposition, in which he described all the things that went wrong in Quebec or in Canada at the time. And of course, it was a long list of grievances. So Edouard Caron was a kind of moderate man who says, okay, no, don't go so far. Let's find accommodement, and let's find a way to work together. And finally, he abandoned, let's say, the fight because of people like Légaré who was so much against him and tried to change the things. When Lord John Russell decided that the Governor General could get to the public fund without consulting the Assembly, that's what created, of course, the rebellion of 1837. What did Légaré then during the rebellion? He was in Quebec. He joined the so-called Fils de la Liberté, and he was caught by the police, put in prison for 5 days, mind you, not too much. And he never had a trial after, but really he was seen as a dangerous man, as a guy going too far. Yeah, well, he will end up relatively mild in the Assemblée législative, finally, in 1855, but he will die a few months after, so he will not really enjoy the power. But I tell you just these details about his life in order that you will see that this is one of the aspects of Légaré involvement. Not only to paint about politics, but eventually also to be a part of it, as he could. My ex-student, I have few students that have very well, who became very famous. Pierre Théberge, for instance, and John Porter, this is the one, made a huge thesis about Légaré. And every month he came and said, another thing that Légaré was involved in, les pompiers de Québec, la Société Saint-Jean-Baptiste here, la Société de la Tempérance there. And each time in the newspaper of the time, you see Légaré get involved in this and that and that and that constantly. And so his thesis was growing and growing. I says, okay, you made your point, it's clear. This guy was not just a kind of politicien en chambre. He was really involved in everything. But on the other hand, he got interested also in painting situations that you could describe as political. And this is the painting that we have here in the museum by Légaré, and which is interesting in that way. When we acquired a painting here, it was titled by John Porter, by the way, who is the great specialist of Légaré. He have made his research, his PhD on him, but he have worked on his career all the time since, I would say, yesterday. And so when we got this painting here, he suggested that the title should be Edmund Kean reciting Shakespeare in front of the Indians. Why? Because he thought of, the painting could be dated 1826. And in 1826, we know as a fact that the famous actor, the famous Shakespearean actor, English, was called Edmund Kean, came in Quebec and was very much impressed by the native people that he met here, and that he had some contact with them, and why not go like this on a little landscape like this, and step on a piece of stone and recite in front of them a piece of Shakespeare. And you see the little group of people listening to that with much attention. Then, if you go back to the sources that, when you have an affirmation of that kind, it's very general. Edmund Kean was in Quebec City in 1826, yes, but what exactly happened? So in the newspaper of the time, you can follow it quite precisely. First thing, Kean went to the Lorette village. You know this village outside of Quebec where there's a Huron population. And there he was very impressed by what he saw there. And he decided to invite the chief that received him quite well in the Hotel Albion in Quebec. So the second move of Kean, it's in Quebec City itself, not on the beach there. And so then he distributed medals to all these chiefs, and they give him a costume, you know, in which he was painted when he came back in England, was very happy with this, jouer au sauvage, it's always nice. Bon. And so when you go to the sources, you realize that it's not exactly what is painted there. And when we discussed that with John Porter, he said, well, he could have also been to this place since he was already in contact with them. Yeah? So, as you can imagine, other historians come, and they said they have another hypothesis. This has nothing to do with Edmund Kean. This is one of these famous occasions when the people preaching for tempérance, for not drinking. It's an obsession in Quebec, of course. And this guy in black like this, they are like the two Blue Brothers a little bit. These guys in black preaching in front, after making gesture like this, in front of the Indians who look at them médusés, could be also that. But what strikes me there, it is, even if we forget this quarrel of historians between who was that and what date and everything, it is that you have a kind of little agora in the essence. You have two kind of people there, whatever they are, tempérants and drunkards, or amateurs de Shakespeare and great actor, whatever they are. They have different difference, but they are now able to communicate and to create a little circle in which everybody agrees. This is what politics is about. It's kind of a possibility of coexistence, inequality, when you maintain differences also. Because habitually differences goes with inequality. When you feel they are just, they are different, but they are much lower than me. So very often it's like that. But when you have both, like this, when you could have okay, whatever the definition of what's happening there, we don't know really. You could say, well, you have in its source this political aspect that I was describing before. The idea of plurality that I was mentioning, and also the idea that essentially politics is what happens between people and not inside of each one. It's this possibility of having this balance of interests and common aim, common value for a while, maybe for not long, but it doesn't matter. This is like in the essence, the agora. And I'm not astonished at all that a guy like Légaré could have been thinking in those terms. That because he was so much involved in the political things, he knew what it was. And the place where the things happen, in fact, we could determine because we have a watercolor done by Légaré, which is exactly the same landscape that you saw before, except that there's no people in it. And it's done in Saint-Pétronille. You know where it is? It's Ile d'Orléans. You see the Orléans Highland on the tip there. When you look toward Quebec, and you see the Saint-Charles River and the Côte de Beaupré a little bit on the right. And this is more or less where he took his sketch, if you want, for the painting. And this place was known as a possible encampment of Indians. And so he may have imagined a scene like this or created it, but it's based at least on the local is well established. We know where it could be at the time. The other picture that Légaré have devoted to the politics is very different. I would say here it's more the perversion of the political issue. It's called election scene at Château Richer. So now it doesn't imply natives, it implies only French-Canadian. And Château Richer, as you know, is a village near Quebec. And what you see, it's not very clear. Of course, you have to know a little bit what happened. Okay, it's the election of a representant of Château Richer. And so there are two candidates, of course, as always. One, Monsieur Gay, and the other is called Monsieur Cochon. In French, it's more, we insist, when you are called like this, you insist on the O, cochon, et non pas cochon, because then it's finished. Alors, not good. The guy was called like this. And the two parties apparently have fought physically. There is an article in the newspaper of the time that describes what happened. First, they says, okay, Monsieur Cochon came with all the crème de la crème, you know, of the Society of Quebec with two lawyers and a pilot, and a lot of these great people were with him. Alors, Monsieur Gay have only 2 or 3 people around him, of the local people. See, they tried to make the two candidates in contrast like this. And then, at the end of the articles, there's a witness who saw what happened. And he says the people of Cochon came with sticks and bats and created a kind of havoc on the bridge that you see. I don't know if you can notice it. There's a kind of, there's a road, and then you see a lot of people kind of climbing. And they are on a little bridge that passed through a river, above a river. It's called la rivière du Saut à la Puce. And behind, there's a bigger structure in which the discourse, of course, was said. And so they went out of this and they began to fight together. And this, of course, instead of what I was describing before, where you exchange discourse, when you try to convince the other and try to convince by the other, it's a perversion of the political act, since you get la raison du plus fort est toujours la meilleure. If you can bat the others, you win. And that's what more or less got so... I could imagine Légaré so angry that he decided to make a painting about it. Monsieur Cochon is this one. And there is maybe in the painting an allusion, a kind of symbolic allusion to his name. If you see on the foreground, you see 4 children with sticks and some with a little bow and arrows. And they run behind pork. Not after him. They are with him. And on the other hand, you have one kid, but we don't see it much in my reproduction here, but one thing is sure, is associated with sheep. So if you make the distinction between, okay, if I say a pig and all that, translate that in French, you see, 4 enfants avec un cochon. Of course, everybody, when they saw the picture, thought of Monsieur Cochon lui-même, and he says, okay, this is a kind of allegoric or symbolical representation of what happened. So in the foreground, what Légaré suggests, it is that these bad children beat the good one who was with the sheep. The sheep habitually are always associated with some peace and some tranquility, and so you understand what could be the this interpretation. Let's see, was suggested by one of my students in 1972, and we always kind of quote her, you see, because it's her who had the first idea of this thing. Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense. So you see the two aspects, or a representation of this discourse, or on the other hand, this representation of the interruption of the discourse, or its destruction. Légaré had all the reason to hate this guy, this Monsieur Cochon ici, because Joseph Edouard, because he tried twice. He tried to get elected in a kind of local election, let's say, and he was opposed by Cochon and always lost, because Cochon insisted that he was a radical, that he was a friend of Papineau, and because of that we don't need a guy like this and all that. So you can understand that for Légaré, this was not his best friend. La raison du plus fort est toujours la meilleure. And there's another painting who could be also have a lot of political implication. The problem is that we are not sure that it's by Joseph Légaré. It's possible, it's the kind of things that he could have painted, but it's not absolutely sure. And it's a representation of the burning of the Parliament building in Montreal. When you had the l'acte d'union between the Upper and Lower Canada, when we made a single country, they decided to have the Parliament in Montreal, which makes sense. Instead of Quebec or Toronto, it would be like in middle, and so they decided to make the Parliament there. The Parliament was managed from a huge market that was there, that was called the Marché Sainte-Anne, and they transformed it with offices and with rooms to discuss and everything. But then suddenly, Lord Elgin accepted the bill presented by Louis-Hippolyte Lafontaine that people who had their property damaged during the rebellion of 1837 should be compensated. This was not very well accepted by some Anglo-Canadian of the time, and they decided to burn the Parliament. We think that the people who perpetrated this act were from the English side. And I try to be as objective, but I had no problem when I give the lecture in French. People said, yeah. With you, I'm walking on eggshells. But anyway, let's say this is long past, 1840. So the Parliament was burned, and this is a representation, of course, of this conflagration. Légaré has made a representation of fire in Quebec a little bit similar to that, so that's why it's attributed to him. It's at the McCord Museum, this thing. Yeah? But again, it will be a good example of this kind of violent intervention in the political field to stop the talking. Maybe it was not very clever from Lord Elgin to do that, to accept this type of bill, say, maybe so little time after the rebellion. I could imagine that your tax will pay for the poor guy, the poor French guy who had somebody pass on his land with the cannon and could complain about, my clôture a été détruite, je suis bien obligé. Anyway. And but Légaré liked, of course, Lord Elgin and make a portrait of him. Unfortunately, I just have this bad black and white photo of it. And to compensate, I put a little bit of ridiculous painting on the other side, but by Théophile Hamel, in which really the poor guy will not be able to walk. Huh? Yeah, there's so many medals and things, so the portrait of Hamel went to England with the Lord, but came back in Canada. Maybe he got fed up with it, I don't know, but he sent it back here in Canada. And it's in the Chateau Ramsay now, not in an English collection. And okay. So you see the type of theme. So I will deal with few examples, less dramatic than that, but in which you will see again, the main theme is the discourse, is the talk. For instance, everybody knows about this representation of the Father of Confederation. You know that the actual painting is destroyed. What we know are only copy of it. What you see here, Monsieur Exwood, that I don't know who he is, and I'm not sure he's an important painter, but he copied a photo that was taken of the painting by Robert Harris, but the painting of Robert Harris was destroyed in 1916 when the Parliament was burned. But what these type of painting, and you have many of those, in every Parliament you will have a painting of that type, let's say. What is striking here, it's another aspect I've not mentioned yet. When I spoke of the Greek agora, in which all the citizens could speak their mind and try to achieve a kind of consensus around one idea or one value or others. What I didn't mention then, it is that when you say all the citizens, do you mean everybody? And of course not. At the time, for instance, woman was not in the agora, slave eaters, and you had to be a so-called citizen of Athens to be able to speak. So you have this concept at first that you think, oh, this is wonderful, say equality of all people. It's kind of a universal type of concept, but your universalism is always with the rest. So for instance, I'm always struck by this type of picture in which you have the fathers of Confederation, but not a single mother there. And you don't have women in these representations. They are like absolutely inexistent. They are confined to the domestic sphere that we deal with a few courses ago. And they are not represented in any way in this type of representation. Then this is very important. Finally, this universalism, or pretended universalism, is in fact an hegemony. It's a fight for hegemony. And so a group of, let's say, white, male, not, I don't know, there are no gay people there for sure. I would be very surprised. Let's go. The kind of very narrow type of definition of what the people are representing everybody will exclude a part, always, sometimes a huge part, like, say, if you exclude women, you exclude half of the population, but also others. There's no black either there. There's no native there either. And so you can go on and on like this, and finally you says, okay, this definition of hegemony is in fact a definition of a group that tried to take power and exclude or manage with the other. If they are very minoritaire, if they are a very small group, well, you just ignore them more or less. If they are very big, you make concession to them, not too much, but you tend to keep them at length like this. So you understand these type of representation are ambivalent, and ambiguous. They seem to give much importance to the discourse. It's true. All these people with their little paper, and they're ready to speak about the greatness of Canada and everything. But in fact, you have an hegemonic group of men that are taking power and that express themselves exclusively. You have the only thing that we have of the hand of Robert Harris apropos this painting, it is this gouache that he made in preparation to it, which is nice, but doesn't give much details. For instance, we know that the reunion was in Quebec, and that's why what you see by the windows were the St. Lawrence River, with the other side of the, and the windows were square, but he says, I decided to put them round to make more dignity, that it looks more like a church a little bit. Other example, I dealt with Canada, now I will deal with Quebec, for everybody will be happy. If you go to the Salon Bleu in the Parliament of Quebec, in Quebec City, you have, the seats of everybody, but on the top there, you have a huge painting, was done by a man who's called Charles Huot. And now I present just the painting. And it was dedicated again to the debate. So, okay, this is what we expect when you think of politics. You have a discourse, you have a speech, and it's the official language debate. Meeting of the Legislative Assembly of Lower Canada in 1793, so not much after the conquest. What was the issue? First, they discussed to whom to elect as the main orator, let's say the guy who's sitting on the throne on the right, and they decided for a French Canadian who was called Monsieur Panet. Then the real debate was, okay, the law that we will vote here will be written in both languages, French and English, but only the English version will be the official one, okay? That was what created the debate. And of course, then the guy who proposed that as such is Monsieur Richardson. You see him, you have on the left 3 guys who are sitting, one behind the other. There are 4, let's say, start with the first one. There's one who has a cane. This is Richardson. We know that because we have little graphics where all the names of these people have been noted. And in the back of the picture on the right side, you have a guy with the hands like this, you see, obviously not happy of what's happening. And this is Monsieur de Lotbinière, who is defending the fact that the 2 languages will have force de loi. Both of them will be official, and not only one when we create a bill. And finally, le débat sur la langue finit que the 2 languages are official. And that's why, of course, this big painting of Huot is situated on the top there. Again, not a single woman in the room, and not a single other type of people. Not a black man, of course. And even when you think, I thought, I said, maybe in similar representation that you have in the United States, you will have maybe a black man in, say, for instance, the Declaration of Independence. Again, you have very famous people like Franklin, that you could see on the right a little bit, and others, very famous representative, who speak to Thomas Jefferson. And that's really, it's the creation of independence of the United States, not a single black in the room. And no native either, so of course. That's why, I don't know if you remember this exhibition that we have of Giraudet here, not so long ago. That's why it was so striking that you have this portrait of Belly, but Belly was a representative of the island in the Parliament of France. He was a delegate. He was a political man. And that the fact, of course, that Giraudet took him as a special subject matter, you see, to be represented, was so striking, because it was so unusual. It was not at all what you expected. I will go on again, a kind of a little bit touchy subject. Let's speak, for instance, about Jewish representation. Of course, no, unless you are an incurable racist, you could not say we could recognize a Jew in a group of delegates like this by the way he looks. And indeed, in society where Jews were killed and didn't they could not live, like in the Nazi society, they had to wear a distinctive sign, was this kind of yellow star. Then to be rendered visible things that probably they would have liked not to have. You can understand that sometimes this kind of way to identify the other could be very dangerous. In the case of Nazi Germany, of course, it was lethal. This is a very moving picture done by Felix Nussbaum, who is a painter who was born in Germany, but in 1933, when Hitler went to power, decided to go to Belgium, and thinking that in Belgium he will be safe, he will be okay. And, but during the war, even in Belgium, Jews have to wear the yellow star. You see it on his left. And he showed in his hand a passport in which it's written in the two languages, Juif and Yud, because he's in Belgium, so they speak French there, so they put Juif. And he create an atmosphere absolutely very dramatic around him, these all walls and all that. And in fact, his life finished in a terrible way. Some people in Brussels, of all places, where he was, denounced him to the Nazi Gestapo, and they were sent him and his wife to Auschwitz, where they died. And so you have this idea of suddenly to characterize group and all that. And when I was speaking of this universal hegemony type of things, this is the danger of it, where you begin to characterize other people, or to exterminate them, or just to exclude them. I want to finish this series of lecture with Bourdieu and the Manifesto Refus Global. Why? Because this is another example, much closer to us, in which a painter felt the need to go in the public space and to, not to speak if you want, but to write at least, and to get this idea known from writings. And a little bit like Légaré, I would say, was done, but in a different type of context, and context closer to us today. We know better now what was the circumstances that brought Bourdieu to write the manifesto. If you follow the little, I would say, the little event one after the other, the first thing that happened, it is that he was, as you know, teacher at the École du Meuble, kind of furniture school. And in 1946, there was a strike by the student there because they didn't like one of their teachers. And he was a Frenchman from France, from École Boulle. He must have, Bourdieu called him une vieille barbe, which is not very nice to say. Like an old guy, not very interesting and all that. So the student decided that we have enough of the teacher, we don't want it. And apparently, Bourdieu, more or less, if he says to them, la vieille barbe, of course, was suspected to be maybe behind the things. Because of that, he saw his series of courses that he was giving divided in half, I would say. He was giving 3 courses. The main one was in drawings, but there were 2 others that suddenly, when he came back in September to teach, was removed from the curriculum. He says, I could not complain much because my salary didn't change. Okay. But then you see there's a begin to have a tension between Bourdieu and what he's doing for a living, in a way. The other thing, he made an exhibition at what was called Henry Morgan at the time, in 1946 too, which is, of course, as you know, what we call the Bay today, exactly in the same building, at the 5th floor. And it's after 3 years that he have exhibited in solo. The exhibition before was at the Dominion Gallery in 43, so 3 years was no exhibition of Bourdieu, and now there was one. The critic was almost inexistent. People were saying things that this is abstrait, on comprend rien, things like that. It was not very good. There was one good critic, Dr. Paul Dumas, but if you put that in parentheses, the rest was nothing. And then what I'm showing you on the right, it is the so-called list of price. in which normally it's any artist put that in the gallery and expect that everything would get sold, or most of it. And so Madame Bordua here wrote the name of the people who seemingly bought painting. And you have the price also nearby. There's no title, just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, as if you want to be very abstract and not, you don't give title. And, but the list of people there who bought painting is curious. Claude Gauvreau first on the top, is a poet. He's a man who was living at his mother place at the time. And I don't imagine how he could have $150 to pay for a painting of Bordua at the time. See? I don't see how this could be possible unless he will be indebted to today. It's really good. Monsieur Paul Larocque, this is something else. This is a real collector. This is a man who had money and who still exists and bought a painting. Then you have Monsieur Hainaut. Alors, Hainaut is again a poet, as if Gilles Hainaut was a wonderful man. He was the head of the Musée d'Art Contemporain for a while. When we created the Musée d'Art Contemporain, he was the first director. And then finally, Jean-Paul Riopel, another great collector, as you know. He's a painter. And again, how he could pay a painting $100. Well, in the case of Riopel, we know that he paid much less, because Bordua or his wife took a ledger in which they wrote all the sales that they made. And this painting that Riopel is supposed to have bought is known at least by a black and white photo that I show you. That is called L'Hôtel aux Idolâtres, or the Idolaters' Altars, if you want. And it's a very small little painting that Bordua says in his ledger that he sold them for half price that was on the list before. So this, for any painter, is not a great sale. You sell half price 3 paintings, and the 2 others who are mentioned, the 2 others collectors there were people who have already bought painting and brought them to the show. It was on the, if you summarize, as a teacher, he saw his teaching load much reduced, and as a painter, the critic was not very good, and the sales were very bad. And he decided that enough is enough. I'm going out of this country. I don't want to live here anymore. I want to be in France. And he wrote to Paul Beaulieu. And Paul Beaulieu was the secretary of the embassy in Paris of Canada, the secretary of the embassy of Canada in Paris. He knew, how come he knew Paul Beaulieu? He made the portrait of his wife in 41. So they knew each other a little bit. And he tell Beaulieu, okay, enough is enough. I cannot live here anymore. I want to go to France. If France wants my painting, I want to live there with my family. I will sell my house. I will make $7,000, $8,000 with that. I will be able to live 4 years in Paris with that money. Maybe not, but anyway, that's what and he says, I'm wanting to go in September, next September. What do you think? So Beaulieu says, this is not a very good idea. 46 in Paris, just after the war, to move there, it was really the worst place to be, because there was a lot of difficulty to survive and all this. And so they tried to calm him down and to say, well, think of it. Another thing happened also at the same period. I thought I'd give you all these little details because you will see how finally the manifesto came out from that. One of his students, the Jean-Paul Riopel that we have just mentioned, went to Paris about that time. And he says to Bordua, I will bring with me photos, and I will show them to any director of gallery that you think that could be interested in. And so then Bordua said, oh, if you go to Paris and you show our paintings, even of the group of the Automatistes, please go to Pierre Loeb Gallery. He had a memory of Pierre Loeb Gallery when he was in Paris in the 30s, were a place where he could saw Picasso and great masters. So he thought, okay, if we can go to in Pierre Loeb Gallery, we are okay. So Riopel says, perfect, I bring this stuff with me and I will make contact with this man, don't worry. He came after a few weeks and nothing happened much, and got married, went back to Paris, and then finally he says, I met Monsieur Pierre Loeb, and I show him your stuff, but here I must read you what he wrote. Maybe I will read it in French a little bit and you will see. Ayant finalement consenti à me recevoir, Pierre Loeb n'a pas voulu dire grand-chose lorsque je lui montrai vos œuvres, toiles, photos et la plaquette de Robert Illy. C'est de l'automatisme, mais, et ce mais est resté sans explication. Okay, what happened? Okay, having finally accepted to meet me, Pierre Loeb didn't want to say much when I show him your works, one oil painting that he brought with him, the little painting that I just showed you before, some photos, and the booklet by Robert Illy. Robert Illy has written a little booklet on Bordua in which the photos are black and white. It's automatism, but, and this but stayed unexplained. And then Riopel continued. What I have difficulty to explain to myself is that he had liked very much my work and my watercolors, asking me to show him what I will do in the future, and he even give me a letter of introduction to meet Breton. You could imagine the reaction of Bordua when he got this letter. It must have been surprise, revolt. He must have been quite mad at this. I tried to reconstruct exactly what happened. First of all, let's see the people who are involved here. Okay, here you see a photo of, I would say, the Pierre Loeb gallery people. Pierre Loeb is the guy in front, in the middle, with a cat that you see in the middle, in the front. And the other people around him are most of them are quite well known. You have Vera de Silva, who is a painter associated with the Abstraction Lyrique group. Then you have a man who is called Germain. We don't know much about him. And then you have Georges Mathieu. And Mathieu is the guy who made a painting in 2 minutes and a huge painting and very well known at the time also. Then you have Riopel, who with his pipe, is very sure of himself. And finally, the Chinese man on the right is Zhao Qi. And I'm even not sure that a painting on the wall behind them is not a Riopel. It looks like a Riopel, anyway. And so these are the protagonists. This where I would say Bordeaux would have liked to be with these people. That's what he aspired to be. And okay, so now what Riopel showed to Pierre Loeb. The little booklet by Robert Illy, in fact, gave a lot of importance to some of his figurative work. For instance, you had, these are photos are taken from the book, from the booklet in question. So I present them in black and white because that's the way Pierre Loeb saw them. And one, okay, is a portrait of his brother, Portrait de Gaillard. It's a name, a nickname that they give to the brother of Bordua. The other is portrait of Madame G. Madame G is Madame Gagnon. You know, it's my mother. And she's here now, very happy, in the museum on the wall. And so, again, represented only in black and white. And you have also these three batters. So he leaves through this little booklet, and that's what he sees. So if he says, oh, it's not even automatiste, this is figurative painting. And then I show you, for instance, this beautiful little painting that will be closer to the automatist period, entitled La Cavale Infernale, and that we could translate the mare from hell. That's a good translation. But in fact, I showed it to you now in color, but what he saw is that. You understand? It's always like this magnificent gouache of Bordua was presented like this. And how Riopel presented his aquarelle in black and white, in photos? Or did he present the horrible things that he was doing at Bisson Place? You remember that I spoke at the first thing? No. He represented, okay, the little painting of Bordua that you see there on the wall. But his own stuff was presented in real, of course. I'll give you one example of what type of mes aquarelles, like he says, that he liked very much, and he asked me to present them more. This, when Bordua knew that and knew what happened, he wrote then to another friend, to Monsieur Guivillot, and he says to him, I don't want to go to France anymore. This dream of being in France is over. And he says, I thought I was detached from any type of nationalism, but now I see that if I want to reach a certain international status, I have to start by putting roots here in this country. And this is, I would say, a pivotal letter of Bourdieu, because then he decided to write Refus Global. Then he decided not to dream of escaping the situation here, but to affront him and to say directly what he thought. Yeah, and then, of course, what we got is Le Goupillon et la Tuque. Then, when in the middle of the Refus Global, Bourdieu shouts, Au diable, Le Goupillon et la Tuque, what he means is this. Le Goupillon is this thing, the little black thing on the... If you are not a Catholic, you never saw that. It's the beginning of the High Mass. The priests come in front. I don't know if they do it still, but they used to do it in my childhood, and we were always a little bit scared of that. He goes with this holy water receptacle and then spray water on the first row, of the people. And this, of course, in reminiscence of the holy baptism, and it's okay, but it's a... alors, le goupillon, c'est ça. In a way, for Bourdieu, when he says the hell with the goupillon means the hell with religion, the hell with all this oppression that we had from religious people. And la tuque is the nationalist symbol. Of course, at the time, the nationalists are Duplessis, or people like that, so he wants to detach himself from this type of politics. But then you have certainly, say, Bourdieu deciding, I will take root here, and I will tell loud and clear what I think should be changed. This is the negative aspect of the manifesto, but there's a positive aspect who have been less stressed, in which, at a certain point, Bourdieu says, au refus global, nous opposons la responsabilité entière, meaning that, okay, there's a part we refuse certain aspect, but on the other hand, we take responsibility of certain others. And the more positive aspect of the manifesto are in fact related to anarchy. This can be maybe a little bit surprising, but it seems that Bourdieu, around 1947 already, was in contact with some famous anarchists that we have here in Quebec at the time. Like one of them was Alex Primo. He received a periodical from France and from United States and created little group of anarchists here, was in contact with Jewish anarchists also here in Quebec, and creating a little movement like this. And you do have, in fact, if you read the manifesto, the Refus Global, you have a phrase like "Vive l'anarchie resplendissante" at the end, meaning that anarchy should be the real solution of the contact with Primo can be demonstrated by this photo. This photo was taken by him in 1947. So this is Bourdieu in front of his famous painting, The Leeward of the Island, that is at the National Gallery now, Sous le vent de l'île in French. And if you look behind him, you will recognize certain little elements that are in the painting. So the painting is well dated, it's 47, so it's also the date of the photo. So it's the end of the Primo was making his living by photographing, by making taxi and things like that, of anything except the army and whatever, as an anarchist. When Bourdieu was, because of the manifesto, lost his job at the École du Meuble, because this was finally said that a teacher with such ideas cannot teach in the province of Quebec. And so he lost his job completely. Then he tried to defend himself in front of the journalists. And again, we are at the level of speech. We are at the level of discourse. And what he says, okay, this condemnation that you make of me is unjust because it's done according to certain religious principles. And he says, these principles doesn't apply to me the only thing I recognize is the rights of man. And this is surprising because they were not yet voted at the time when he said that. He knew that there was discussion about them at the high level of the ONU and United Nations and everything, and because the newspaper of the time was speaking of that all the time. So he referred to that as the principle on which he should make a defense for himself. Huh? This is interesting because, in a way, for an anarchist, the only things that can save him, in a way, it is, in fact, the Declaration of Human Rights. Huh? And, of course, this argument was not very good in Quebec at the time, with, especially not with say, the hegemony of the religion. For instance, you have journalists who said, even if the government put you out of your job, they did well because what you write is unthinkable in Quebec. And so this type of defense, finally, was not very efficient. But that he tried to do it, and we have found in his paper 30 copy of the same defense that he wanted probably to give to many journalists as possible, and on which he says again, je m'appuie sur la Déclaration des droits de l'homme, and indeed about the time in 1948, a little bit after the publication of the manifesto. Manifesto was launched in August 1948, and the Declaration of the Human Rights was in December 1948. So a little bit after, then Madame Roosevelt, who was the head of the committee, and see, what they could see in the newspaper, for instance, there was discussion about things, the right of people to move out of any country, and especially of their country. And for instance, the Soviet Union delegate at the time says, yes, I agree with that, but we should add just in accordance to the law of their country. So with this, of course, nobody can move. Huh? And so at the end, the rights were voted, if you will, the declaration was voted, except with Soviet Union, Yugoslavia, I think, and Saudi Arabia, and South Africa, where all the, say you were in time of apartheid and all that. And so for each section like this, there were hesitation of signing this declaration. But anyway, it's a great moment. And it's interesting to see that if you go to politics like Baudouin wanted to do in a way, but not in kind of party politics, but really in the real issue of politics, you have to be in this kind of very, very broad context. So as you saw, the representation of politics in painting is a difficult subject. It's a subject, or it's very limited in terms of visual presentation, people speaking, and of course painting don't speak. Or, in the other hand, imposing to the artist to go out of what they are good to do, painting, and to try to go in the public sphere. So we finish with this thought, this series of lectures. I was very touched by your support. I see here people maybe from 7 years that they come to these lectures. I'm so worried that they say, oh, he repeat himself. No, really, it's the end. Oh, pas encore les garés. Oh, mon Dieu. And so I tried to change a little bit, but so I'm very touched by your support, and you are a wonderful audience, and so thank you very much.